What is a glitch? Well, by definition, a glitch is known as a malfunction or any unexpected error in computer coding. But in video games, we could simply say a glitch is something that deviates from normal play. But to better define what a glitch is, we first need to define what we consider to be normal play. We could say that normal play is any game mechanic operating as intended to give an intended result. For example, in The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, while inside Jabu Jabu's belly, you acquire the boomerang. The boomerang can be used to damage enemies which normally can't be damaged with other weapons. After defeating the enemies, you'll trigger an event that allows you to progress through the area. So in this example, we can assume that using the boomerang on these enemies is an intended mechanic because they are only vulnerable once you get access to the boomerang. And after you hit all of the enemies, an intended event will trigger to allow progression through the level. So if this is what we consider to be normal play, then by inverse a glitch would be an unintended game mechanic being used to give an unintended result. Back in Jabu Jabu's belly, there is a gap which blocks access to the final boss room, which is located towards the beginning of the area. Speedrunners are able to use a technique called a mega flip in order to leap across this gap and skip the puzzles and mini-boss you'd normally have to do to close the gap. By combining the invincibility you get with rolling, with damage of any kind hitting Link's shield, and then backflipping, Link's backflip will send him further than usual, making landing on the other side of the gap possible. The mega flip isn't a vanilla game mechanic, therefore we assume it is unintended, and since the gap isn't possible to cross with normal game mechanics until close to the end of the area, we can consider crossing the gap early an unintended result. These examples reinforce our definitions of what we consider to be normal play and glitches. But what if we expand on those definitions and consider instances where a game mechanic is working as intended, but instead produces an unintended result? For instance, damage boosting. In most video games, when you take damage, you get some sort of invincibility and a recoil effect pushing you away. These side effects can sometimes make taking damage a useful technique for increasing speed. If you were to jump the gap in Jabu's belly while holding a bomb and allow it to explode while crossing, it's actually possible that the damage you take will allow you to reach the other side. But since this is an instance of a game mechanic working as intended, which is the bomb dealing damage and knockback after it explodes, but gives an unintended result, which is landing on the other side of the gap, do we consider it a glitch or normal play? This very question has been the main cause of controversy when deciding on a consistent rule set for glitchless categories in speedrunning. But for the purpose of this video, we'll define instances like these as exploits. Hello ladies and gents, my name is EZScape, and today we're going to be talking about the history of controversial rulings in glitchless speedruns. I hope you all enjoy. Even before the concept of speedrunning was coined, the idea of not allowing glitches in competitive gaming was expressed by many in early days of its conception. One of the first and more prevalent organizations for tracking video game world records, Twin Galaxies, forbade the use of glitches in video games on their leaderboards. This stance on the rules existed prior to speedrunning, which was otherwise known as fastest completion, on several arcade games. Glitches in games such as Galaga, which if you waited around to the end of a level with 1 or 2 enemies left and kept avoiding their shots, a counter would add up each shot. And if it got too high, the enemies would stop shooting altogether. Then after finishing the level, none of the enemies would shoot at you for the rest of the game. Instances like these proved to be uncompetitive, and what Twin Galaxies would base a lot of their rulings off of in favor of anything that was against the spirit of the game. And when the first games that were tracked by fastest completion were introduced to the leaderboards, the same rules were applied. Some of these games included Super Mario Bros., Legend of Zelda, Metroid, and Castlevania. The rules on Twin Galaxies are applied at a game-by-game basis, which is honestly a great way to go about it because every game is different, therefore unique rules makes the most sense. The issue is the basis in which the rules are constructed needs to have some sort of consistency, and when you include an arbitrary rule like no glitches, that can be pretty difficult. Also, the rulings are made by individual referees, which means the rulings for each game would really come down to their interpretation of the rules, including glitchless. This would result in inconsistent rulings, and even rules that could be considered downright contradictory. I can prove this with examples in some of the games I mentioned earlier. The current rules for fastest completion in Super Metroid on the Twin Galaxies leaderboards allows the use of a trick called Mach Ball, which allows you to move quickly while in a morph ball form. The issue here is this isn't an intended mechanic, and it can be used to gain early access to super missiles and even skip a boss fight. This fits the exact description of what we consider to be a glitch, and even more, you really couldn't consider it in the spirit of the game. And while it may seem like I'm splitting hairs with this trick, if we look further into the rules, it also states most other glitches are banned. And from what we will learn later in this video is that when you make a category like glitchless, or a category that excludes certain glitches or tricks, the rules need to explicitly state what the runner is or isn't allowed to do. This excerpt in the rules also makes it sound like there are other glitches that are allowed, which is confusing, because the global rules on the site forbids the use of glitches. But depending on the game, sometimes glitches were allowed. Like I said earlier, every game is different, therefore unique rules are sometimes necessary. For example, in the Crazy Taxi titles, most glitches were banned, but some were allowed because Twin Galaxies felt that they were within the spirit of the game. An example of this is a trick called the Crazy Hop, which could be used on certain tracks like the Crazy Zigzag to hop over gaps. And due to the nature of the trick, you really can't consider it a glitch, but with the definitions I made earlier, it falls more in the category of an exploit. Regardless, at the time it was interpreted as a glitch, but was allowed due to being in the spirit of the game. And perhaps whoever created the rules for Super Metroid felt the same way about the mock ball trick. So the main issue here isn't necessarily what you consider to be a glitch or not a glitch, but finding a consistency of what you could consider to be in the spirit of the game. This issue is demonstrated in the rules for the original Super Mario Bros. In these rules, it disallows the use of wall jumping on the premise of it being a glitch. But in order to understand if wall jumping is a glitch or not in Super Mario Bros., we first have to understand how it works. You see, every time Mario runs or jumps into a wall, he clips slightly into it before the game zips him out. But since walls are made out of 16 by 16 pixel blocks, if Mario clips into the block in that specific pixel, he'll be standing on the block until the game zips him out. But if Mario jumps on the frame before the game zips him out, he will be able to jump out of the wall, resulting in what we call a wall jump. So due to the nature of how wall jumping works, we could definitely consider it a glitch by definition, but one could argue that wall jumping is within the spirit of the game. The trick itself is present in a lot of other 2D Mario games including Super Mario Bros. 3 and Super Mario World 1 and 2. The trick is even featured in Nintendo's Super Mario Bros. 3 strategy guide as an alternative to maneuvering over a wall. Miyamoto, the creator of the games, even said in an interview that certain glitches in Super Mario Bros. Were actually intentional, and even talks about the minus world glitch, which is a glitch level in the game, and says that the level wasn't intentional, but then says it's not like it crashes a game, so it's really kind of a feature too. So it could be possible that the wall jump trick was intentional, since the way it operates is a result of intended mechanics. But regardless of whether or not it was intended, why wasn't it allowed by TG when tricks like Crazy Hopping and Mock Ball were? Who knows, but this is the reason why it's almost impossible to make logically consistent rulings for glitchless categories based on what is in the spirit of the game. As a side note, some of these rules may have existed this long simply because Twin Galaxies doesn't update their rules for specific games or tracks. Reason being is so that runs that were already submitted wouldn't get removed and people couldn't scoop up an easy world record with the updated rules. There are definitely pros and cons with updating rules, but I'll talk about that later. Later on in the development of speedrunning at Twin Galaxies came the legendary Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time speedrun by Mike TSA Diamani in 6 hours 45 minutes and 17 seconds. This run would not only be the first ever speedrun of Ocarina of Time, but because it was following Twin Galaxies rule set, we could also consider this one of the first glitchless speedruns. Outside of Twin Galaxies, glitchless speedruns weren't that common. I mean, people were trying to beat the game as fast as humanly possible, so it didn't make sense to not use glitches if they would help get that time down. But as more and more glitches were being discovered in Ocarina of Time, players eventually wanted another way of playing the game without having to use complicated glitches. Sometime in 2013, ZeldaSpeedruns.com created a leaderboard for the glitchless category, but there were some issues with the rules. Skipping the Big Octo mini-boss fight in Jabu Jabu's belly via damage boosting was not allowed, yet damage boosting itself and other exploits were allowed. Like we just learned with Twin Galaxies, you can't make consistent or logical rules for glitchless categories based on what is or isn't in the spirit of the game. The same thing goes for allowing or disallowing specific skips that can be performed without the use of glitches. By allowing exploits like damage boosting, speedrunners left a lot of potential for what they would possibly be able to skip later on. And since skipping the Big Octo mini-boss in Jabu's belly was the only skip that was banned from the rules, literally any other type of skip done with allowed techniques would be considered allowed since they weren't specifically noted. For example, damage boosting in the Shadow Temple to skip the hover boots and the Dead Hand mini-boss fight was a completely legal skip since the rules didn't disallow it. But how was this skip any different than the skip in Jabu's belly? I mean, they both involved damage boosting, and both of them skipped a mini-boss. Eventually, the community realized this inconsistency, and damage boosting to skip the Big Octo mini-boss fight would be allowed. But this just goes to show, just because something is a skip, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a glitch, and the two should be dealt with separately when it comes to making categories. So fast forward to early 2017, and the glitchless category in Ocarina of Time is becoming extremely optimized. More and more skips and techniques were being discovered and implemented into the run. But with the addition of so many skips and tricks, a large portion of the community wasn't happy with how the category was turning out. I mean, weren't they happy that new tricks were being discovered to get the glitchless category's time lower? Well, it all goes back to the original reason of why the glitchless category was made in the first place. A way to play the game without using complicated glitches. And in some people's opinion, also a way to play the game without complicated exploits either. The community was completely split on what the rules for the category should or shouldn't allow. Since there was no way to go about making the rules for the category in a way that everyone would be satisfied, the community decided to split the category in two, resulting in two subcategories named Bug Limit and Glitchless. Bug Limit kept the old rules exactly, and once the split was finalized, Bug Limit actually loosened up the rules just a little bit, allowing a couple extra things that were banned before. The other subcategory named Glitchless banned all glitches and anything that could be viably rationalized as a glitch, or for the sake of this video, exploits. Although this was probably the best resolution the community could have came up at the time, we can still learn something from this, and that is if a speedrunning community is looking to make a more restrictive category for the speed game, then they should make sure that running the game without glitches restricts the speedrun in a way that they intend it to. Because the entire point of speedrunning is to achieve a goal in the fastest time possible within the rules of each category. And if the rules don't prevent a speedrunner from using a specific trick that saves time, then there's always a chance that someone will decide to use it in a run. Even before the Zelda speedrunning community developed their glitchless category in 2013, the Pokemon speedrunning community had already regularly been doing glitchless speedruns for a few years. The 80% category was rarely ran due to glitch discoveries like save corruption, which made it possible for speedrunners to warp to the Hall of Fame at the very beginning of the game. There really wasn't any competition for 80%, since with this glitch it was possible for anyone to beat the game at the time of 0. At the time, the community didn't categorize glitches, so something like 80% no save corruption didn't exist. Because of this, glitchless was always the main category, but there were some issues with what the community considered to be glitches. In Pokemon Red, you visit Lavender Town to hear Mr. Fuji, who heads the volunteer Pokemon house, has been kidnapped to Pokemon Tower by Team Rocket, and it's your duty to figure out what's happened to him. While traveling through Pokemon Tower, you are blocked access to the top floor by a ghost, which you can't fight or bypass without first obtaining an item called a EZScape. That is until speedrunners found utility with an item called the Pokédoll. The Pokédoll costs 1000 Pokécoins, and its functionality is to flee from any battle with a 100% success rate. If you use one while in battle with a ghost, you'll escape the battle and be able to get to the top floor without having the EZScape. Since the Pokédoll is working as intended, which is to flee any battle with a 100% success rate, but gives the unintended result of skipping the EZScape, this trick would be considered an exploit and not a glitch. The use of this skip was allowed in the glitchless category, but by allowing a trick like this, it set the bar of what would be allowed later on in the development of the glitchless category. Several years later, in early November 2015, a new bug was discovered by the speedrunner Swaff called Bike Shop Instant Text Bug. During Swaff's speedrun, he accidentally went to the bike shop before beating the second gym leader named Misty. Normally after defeating Misty, you'll visit Vermilion City. While there, you pick up the third gym badge, the Cut HM, and the bike voucher. The developers never intended you to get the bike before getting the voucher, and to make sure you didn't, they made the price for the bike a whopping 1 million Pokecoins, which was 1 Pokecoin higher than the cap of 999,999. So when Swaff went to the bike shop before beating Misty, he didn't have the bike voucher to get his bike for free, and he definitely didn't have the 1 million Pokecoins to buy the bike. But when he left the shop, he noticed that all of the text in game was coming out a lot faster than normal.
Wait, what? Why is my text going that fast? What did I just do? I am so confused.
Apparently during a dialogue with a bike shop owner, the game changes a bit that controls the text speed at instant, so that the price of the bicycle and a bike shop owner's message come out at the same time. Due to a programmer oversight, if you press B to end this dialogue, the bit never reverts back and you'll now have instant text displayed until you open another menu. With the discovery of this new trick, the community had to decide whether or not it would be allowed in the glitchless category. Due to the nature of the bug, it was pretty hard to figure out if it was a glitch or not, because although the instant text is an unintended result, pressing B to end the dialogue is an unintended mechanic, which means this could fall under the category of an exploit. The bug also had some similarities with the Pokédoll skip, and the fact that the reason both of the tricks work is due to oversights from the developers. Regardless, the decision was up to the community. Should the community ban the bug because it was too close to the definition of what a glitch was, or should they allow it because the trick was too similar to exploits like the Pokédoll skip that were allowed in the glitchless category? The community decided to allow it. The thing about the bug is that it actually optimized the route for the speedrun so much that it had potential to take the world record, and in theory could save up to 1.5 minutes. And 9 months after the discovery, somebody finally did, that person being Gunner Maniac. Gunner obtaining world record using the bug sparked debate in the Pokemon speedrunning community. This debate eventually led to a vote, and the results showed 60-40 in favor of banning the use of Bike Shop Instant Text bug in the glitchless category. But why exactly was this bug allowed for 9 months, but only until someone gets a world record using it, the community decides to ban it? Well, for anyone who is familiar with Pokemon speedrunning, the speedruns themselves are very luck dependent, and by using the Bike Shop Instant Text bug, it made luck an even bigger factor. Like I said earlier, While the bug is active, you can't open any type of menus without the text reverting back to normal. This meant that speedrunners couldn't heal their Pokemon in any way, which resulted in the already high reset rate for the run to be increased by 10 to 20%. With this added layer of luck, it made the category unenjoyable to play for a lot of people, which resulted in the bug getting banned from Glitchless, and in turn there were two categories created. Any percent glitchless, which was the same as the old route before the discovery of the instant text bug, and any percent no major glitches, which was the same as the glitchless category with the instant text bug and any future exploits. So in this example, a world record was actually stripped away from a speedrunner due to a change in the rules. The difference this time is that instead of something being allowed or disallowed because it was or wasn't a glitch, it was just flat out banned due to the community changing their position on allowing it. This decision wasn't backed by what the definition of glitchless speedrun stood for, but instead was made to make the most amount of people happy. And I'm not saying whether or not this was a good or bad thing, but situations like these are possible to happen when making rules in glitchless categories, even in a huge speedrunning community like Pokemon, whose main category for Generation 1 games is glitchless. It is still a shame that Gunner lost his world record for the sake of making the category more enjoyable, but what is done, and hopefully other communities can use this example as a means of caution when developing their own glitchless categories. There's actually a likely chance that they will allow instant text again in the future after the community combines their leaderboards with the Japanese community, but we'll have to wait and find out. During Summer Game Zone Quick 2017, there was a very interesting glitchless speedrun that was performed live at the event. Blackbeltginganinja was running Mirror's Edge glitchless with his co-commentators 5Actual and Dr. T Chops. Before the run, Ninja agreed to allowing Chops to joke about the glitchless category during the run. This led to a highlight reel of the run getting posted with the name Mirror's Edge Speedrunner Roasted SGDQ 2017, which amassed over 1.5 million views on YouTube. And although in the video Chops is just joking about the irony of the glitchless category, he does raise a few valid points.
Also not allowed. But besides that, a lot of stuff is fair game, so this run's going to play a lot more like any percent no major glitches than like a glitchless run.
Wait, if it's just no major glitches, then why is it called glitchless?
Don't worry about it.
Well, that didn't take long, but Dr. T Chops has a good point. Why is it called glitchless if it's more similar to any percent no major glitches? When the Mirror's Edge speedrunning community created the glitchless category, their intentions were similar to other games that I talked about earlier in this video, which was both to make a speedrun category that was better suited for beginners and for a unique way to speedrun through the game without major glitches. But this really doesn't answer the question. Why was it called glitchless? The community was split on whether or not to change the name to something like no major glitches, but in the end it was still the same category with the same rules, so they decided not to change it. And as Ninja put it in his video about the glitchless category,
So, for simplicity's sake, we kept the name the way it is. Also, just to trigger more random people at GDQ. That's another really good reason.
So I guess there you have it. The other glaring question here would be, why are there glitches allowed at all in the first place? One big issue that speedrunners run into when creating rules for glitchless categories are glitches and exploits that are possible to be performed by doing normal game mechanics. Some examples of these I've already mentioned, like the Pokédoll skip and the instant text bug, but these examples don't really relate to Mirror's Edge because they're easily avoidable. Instead, I'll use an example of a glitch/exploit from Ocarina of Time. In Ocarina of Time, the crouch stab move wasn't programmed correctly, and when it is used, it will use the power of your previous sword-like attack instead of doing the damage it's supposed to do. So for you to do a jump slash and a crouch stab, you would be doing the same amount of damage as 2 jump slashes. The crouch stab itself is an intended move in the game, but because of its behavior, it's possible for it to be interpreted as a glitch. The thing is, the move is actually allowed in glitchless. Reason being is because it would be ridiculous for speedrunners to ban the use of an intended move, and even more ridiculous for a speedrunner to have to abandon a run because they accidentally performed it. And sure, you could argue that the power crouch stab, as well as many of the other tricks I mentioned in Pokemon, and the ones I'm about to mention in Mirror's Edge, are actually exploits, because the unintended result is due to intended mechanics. But the main point I'm trying to make here is that exploits or glitches that aren't easily avoidable shouldn't be banned in glitchless categories, and the fact that they are glitches or exploits doesn't change that. As for the glitches/exploits that are allowed in the Mirror's Edge glitchless category, include wall boosting, which is basically just a normal wall jump, and if used properly can result in a small speed boost. Side jump boosting, which is when a side jump is combined with turning the camera shortly after the game puts you at max speed. There are also several kicks which can cancel fall damage that are allowed because the kicks are intended mechanics. There are many more examples I could provide, but I'm sure you guys get the point. It's really hard for a speedrunning community to ban tricks like these, whether they are glitches or not, because all of them are just normal game mechanics with glitchy side effects. With the abundance of so many different exploits and glitches that can be performed in normal play in Mirror's Edge, glitchless may not be the best name for the category. I mean, it literally goes against everything I've been trying to prove in this video. But one thing the Mirror's Edge community did do with the rules from Glitchless is that they made them based off of what was enjoyable, and even rulings which you could consider in the spirit of the game, similar to Twin Galaxies. And instead of worrying about what was and what wasn't a glitch, they made a category that served a purpose, which was a unique way of playing the game and a beginner-friendly category. Glitchless categories can go as far as forbidding the smart use of game mechanics on the premise that they weren't intended to be used in a certain way, therefore they're an oversight. And that's all a glitch really is, an oversight. But at the same time, glitchless categories can also allow exploits that go around the developer's intended method of play on the premise of them, again, being the smart use of game mechanics. So what's the point of glitchless categories? All they seem to do is cause problems and confusion in speedrunning communities, and they're just too arbitrary to make consistent rule sets for. And to this sentiment, I agree. But I would disagree with the notion that glitchless is pointless, because it does have a purpose. In the first episode of this series, I talked about there being a balance in speedrunning, and I sort of vaguely explained it with the purpose of you guys to come up with your own opinions of the balance, and also for me to further reinforce the purpose of it throughout the rest of the episodes in the series. After the initial reaction to this balance, a lot of you guys that weren't in agreement with it didn't agree with it because in your own opinion you thought that there was no balance, and that speed was the only thing that matters. The balance itself really isn't a perfect balance. Speed will always take precedent over entertainment and skill because you can technically still have a speedrun without either of them. But in order for speedrunning to grow, entertainment and skill are very important factors for its success, because there aren't a lot of people who want to compete in something that isn't skillful or entertaining. The entire purpose of glitchless categories is entertainment. Glitchless speedruns offer an additional way of speedrunning a game with the challenge of not being able to use certain tricks that are interpreted as glitches. To say that glitchless is pointless would be the same as saying any additional categories that aren't any percent or 100% are also pointless because they're community defined. But community defined categories are always made with a purpose. Whether they offer unique challenges like collecting the entirety of a specific item, or disallow the use of a major glitch in order to offer different avenues of speedrunning a game, or even just a speedrun of Ocarina of Time where the objective is to use a glitch to make it look like Link is smoking a huge blunt and call it dank percent, they all offer a unique way of speedrunning the game in a way that makes it fun and entertaining either for the speedrunner or for the people watching. The real issue that I see with glitchless categories is that the rule of no glitches for which the categories represent doesn't actually satisfy the original intentions of why a lot of glitchless categories are made. Glitches come in all different shapes and forms, and categorizing them all as equal and banning them really doesn't make sense when a speedrun community's objective with a glitchless category is really just to make a more enjoyable category for a sizable portion of their community. Instead, the community should decide on what is more enjoyable and what they actually want to run, instead of just coming out with a glitchless category in hopes that it satisfies those needs. They could do something like what the Pokemon speedrun community does and have a community vote, or make categories like no major glitches or glitchless instead. And yes, these categories may be vague and community defined, but they make more sense than making a glitchless category and picking and choosing what glitches or exploits are allowed based on what the community wants. Glitchless categories don't allow room for choosing what is or what isn't allowed. They only allow for anything that isn't a glitch. So if disallowing the use of every glitch seems to be the all-around best idea for making an innovative category for your speed game, then glitchless may be the right choice for you. If not, then it probably is not the right choice for you. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like because it doesn't take a lot of time to do, and it's the best way to show support. Also, don't leave yet because I want to give a special shout out to all of the people that made this video possible. Special thanks to Tompa, who's a speedrunner / tasser who helped me with a lot of the information and examples that I showed in this video. This video literally would not have been possible without him, so thank you so much. Also, thanks to Mruczek, who was an ex-head referee for Twin Galaxies. He helped provide me with some of the information regarding the history of glitches at Twin Galaxy. Also, thanks to Danny B21892, Shenanigans, and Blackbeltginganinja, who all helped with information for their speed games. If you're interested in hearing additional information about Ocarina of Time and Mirror's Edge glitchless categories, I have linked some great explanation videos in the description, and I'm sure a world record progression video will be posted at some point for the Generation 1 Pokemon games. Okay guys, that's all I have to say. Subscribe for more speedrunning related content, and as always, I hope you have a beautiful life.